This week, how to uncover deadly secrets online. The secret codes attracting more women into cybersecurity. And Tenet, the Oscar-winning secrets of making time go backwards. Welcome to Click. Now, we all know how easy it is to fake things online these days. Not even photos, voices, or videos are safe, as we well know, right?
Yes, we've worn fake clothes, we've faked our voices with software. I've even been entirely faked with a virtual me, although I am convinced that she looked 10 years older.
I wholeheartedly agree. Now, later in the programme, we're going to see the Hollywood version of this when we look behind the scenes at the film Tenet. Spoiler alert, it wasn't all real.
But these days you don't need a big budget to do this. Just think of those Zoom backgrounds that we've all been looking at. Admittedly, the edges of your hair do often give the game away, but these pictures are pretty good. A lot better than we would have imagined they could be 5 years ago.
So, check out the next advancements. This is where Zoom can put meeting participants into a meeting room, a real one that's not real, although I think something's gone wrong with the sizing here, don't you? Well, my seat's way too low and you're far too small.
There's a variety of scenes. Do you want to meet me for a coffee? Look,
oh,
here
lovely.
we are in a coffee shop or a kitchen.
Look, I'll have a latte, please. I'd say this is cute, but does it make you feel like we're in the same room, really?
No, I still feel like we're on a Zoom call.
Maybe this is one for the audience rather than the participants. But while there is plenty of fakery around, the truth is out there, as a certain fox once said. And there are some people who know where to look.
The internet is just like such a vast place, and like so much out there that's just public. So many ways that information can be manipulated, and even like political news can be manipulated in someone's favor. So that's where I think open source intelligence is useful.
18-year-old computer science student Kenyon Lee has gone viral on TikTok by using so-called open source intelligence, collecting and analysing publicly available data. His main trick is to guess people's exact height by finding other objects in the same shot and tracking down their exact dimensions.
How tall is Spencer?
Now, Kenyon did do this test on a video of me that he found online, and we'll come back to that later, mainly on account of it being the most embarrassing video I've ever posted online. But we have some serious stuff to talk about first. Look, trust me on this. See, there are groups of people out there who are using open source intelligence techniques to do much more serious detective work. These are Anatoly Chapiga and Alexander Mishkin, widely believed to have been responsible for the Salisbury poisonings in 2018. This week, a collective of open source intelligence investigators revealed that they'd also managed to link these two men to the bombing of a Czech ammunition depot 4 years previously. That collective is Bellingcat, and we've met its founder, Elliot Higgins, before. In 2014, it was just him, but now he has a foundation in the Netherlands, 20 staff members, and a growing network of volunteers all across the world. I caught up with Elliot again recently, and he told me that flight logs of Chapiga and Mishkin's trip to the UK in 2018 were revealed by a Russian news site, and that showed that their passport numbers were only a few digits apart, which was, to say the least, unusual.
That caught the interest of Bellingcat, in particular our investigator Christo Grozev. So Christo looked in these databases and discovered these two individuals didn't exist before 2012. They just popped into existence in these databases in 2013, which was suspicious. He then approached basically an information broker who sold him these domestic passport registration documents, and stamped on them was the number of the Russian Ministry of Defense. And it became very clear that these were not ordinary people, that these appeared to be Russian intelligence officers.
Bellingcat's investigation didn't end there. Their evidence showed that scientists linked to the 2018 poisonings were following Russian opposition leader Navalny on 40 separate trips in 2020. And that includes the journey where he was poisoned.
It seems what we've stumbled on, starting with the Skripal story, is this entire kind of network of Russian assassinations using nerve agents. And that sounds completely insane, but we have the receipts, we have the phone records, we have everything that shows this is actually happening. And this is basically unique to Russia because Russia has this kind of huge, massive amount of corruption where data, phone records, even of their spies, are freely available to anyone who does a bit of Googling.
What tools and software do you and your investigators use when you're looking at photos and you're trying to work out where they've been taken and when you're tracking bits of information back across the internet?
We have like an online toolbox, which is basically just loads of links to kind of by category that anyone can go and look at and use themselves. Probably one of the most powerful tools has been, Google. Things like Google Earth and Google Street View, extremely useful in open source investigation for figuring out where stuff is filmed and photographs. There's resources now that allow you to track aircraft, like the flight radar. You have marine traffic that allows you to track vessels.
Photos and videos can now very convincingly be doctored. Does that cause you a problem, or is that a kind of new investigative stream for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, you have this concern about deep fakes, and there is a concern when it's in a sense of kind of the immediate social media reaction to something being shared and retweeted.
It's a little embarrassing, reminds me.
We're approaching stuff as evidence. So when we're looking at that kind of thing, we're saying, okay, here's a video of, Tom Cruise playing golf. Actually, can we find out the golf course? All this information, or someone giving a speech. If someone's giving a speech, it's going to be from a longer piece of media usually. People don't give 2-minute, 20-second speeches. They're generally longer. So we look for that original footage. We look at the account who shared it. Is it shared by a actual official news organisation or Newsfind 24/7? We look at the account behind it. Have they shared stuff before? What has that stuff been? So you look at the kind of different dimensions of that one particular video, both what's inside the video and how it's been shared and propagated online.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. That was Elliot Higgins. Right, I can't put this off any longer. It's time to go back to Kenyon Lee. You remember Kenyon Lee, yeah?
The TikToker who guessed your height from an online video.
Yeah, so the problem is the video that he chose was my Ice Bucket Challenge video from years ago, which if you haven't seen, well, you're probably one of the lucky ones.
I've seen it and I can't unsee it.
I just can't get enough of you.
I was trying to raise money for a good cause in memory of some good people, and so I decided to go full outrageous, and I kind of forgot that the internet never forgets.
This you?
Okay, here comes Kenyon's video.
Well, I guess this pic's not that much better. I decided to find Spencer's height using this pail from his Ice Bucket Challenge. I overlapped these two frames in Photoshop to mark the top of his head and scaled his height using the pixels of the bucket. First, we're going to divide the height of the bucket by 134 and multiply that number by 838 to be left with 68.79 inches, or about 5'8" and 4/5 inches, which translates to about 174 3/4 centimeters.
Anyway, there was a point to all of this. Did he get your height right?
Oh yes, good point. Let's find out. What did he say? He said 174.75. Let's have a look. Oh wow, 175. Not bad. Not bad at all.
Not bad, considering he did that from the dimensions of a bucket.
Yeah, good job he didn't use the 3.5-inch floppy disk.
Hello and welcome to the Week in Tech. It was the week US ride-hailing firm Lyft sold its self-driving arm to Japanese car giant Toyota for $550 million. And TikTok said it would open a European Transparency and Accountability Centre in Ireland. The announcement follows concerns over how the Chinese social media giant serves its young users. The first triple-drop drone hit the skies. This electric device can carry and deliver 3 separate loads, although it can only stay in the air for a maximum of 90 minutes. 2 college engineers won a Lemelson MIT award for their invention, the Grainweevil. This remote-controlled robot helps farmers stay safe while it levels and redistributes the crop. It can also dig itself out of up to 5 feet of grain. And finally, Australian researchers bear the fruits of AI labour. This autonomous arm uses AI to identify nearby apples, leaves and branches, all so it can plan the best path for its pneumatic suction plucker. It can pick and deposit each apple in as few as 7 seconds. How do you like them apples?
This is the Huawei Mate X2, the third iteration of its folding phone and easily its best yet. This time they've changed the format and the folding screen is now protected inside the phone when it's closed, which makes a lot of sense. It's been a real pleasure over the last few years to be able to try out so many of these folding phones and see this new category of devices emerge, and all the manufacturers have had such different approaches. Huawei's was always unusual because it wrapped the folding display around the outside of the device, which looked super cool, but did leave that delicate display vulnerable on the outside of the phone. This time around, they're taking a leaf out of Samsung's book and putting the folding display on the inside of the phone where it's protected, and there's a secondary display on the outside of the device. Actually, I think they've taken a few leaves out of Samsung's book this time around, because this is very similar to the Galaxy Z Fold 2. From the fingerprint reader on the side here, to the speaker on the bottom, to the camera bump and the chunky hinge, you can judge for yourself. I thought folding phones might be the end of every phone looking largely the same, but here we are. The Mate X2 is a much better design than the original. When it's open, the screen snaps into place. When it closes, it snaps shut, and it doesn't leave a gap, which I think is a big improvement over Samsung's design. This is the first one of these I'd feel comfortable enough to throw in my gym bag like I would with my regular phone. There's something else about this that I think is just a fantastic bit of engineering. When I first started using it, it felt really comfortable in my hand, and I couldn't quite put my finger on why. I've always been very scared of dropping these folding phones because they're typically very expensive and fragile. But with this one, I never felt like I was going to drop it. It just sat very comfortably in my hand. And here's why. The phone is wedge-shaped, which moves the center of gravity closer into your right hand. So when you're holding it here, there's less weight over here. It weighs about 300 grams, which is more than a regular phone, but because of this, it doesn't feel like it. The other thing I really like is the outside display, because when this device is closed, it's a full-size regular smartphone with no compromise. You get pretty much the same experience as you would with a regular Pro Huawei smartphone, including the great camera array as you'd expect from a flagship device.
Great stuff. That was Chris Fox. Now, the Secret Services have always been secret. But it seems that some things in the world of espionage are changing. MI5 has just joined Instagram in a bid to move with the times.
But other areas of cybersecurity haven't. For example, the number of women working in the field stands at just 16%. But a schools competition is hoping to change that.
To see the role that women have taken over the years in cybersecurity, first I took a trip back in time to look at some pretty special computers and the coders that used them.
I'm here at the National Museum of Computing on Bletchley Park, a place that's full of computers and memories, not least of the World War II code breaking.
Today it's largely associated with Alan Turing, who cracked the previously unbreakable German Enigma code. His efforts undoubtedly helped give the Allies the edge.
But 63% of those working out of Bletchley Park were in fact women, many of them working on the world-famous Colossus.
The job descriptions that they gave to women code breakers were different from the job descriptions that they gave to men. So if you go and look at the paper records, you'll find that women are described as typists or translators or clerical staff. And that disguises what they were actually doing. And this is because men were on a different pay scale. So the code breakers were on one pay scale and got different job titles from the women who were on a lower pay scale. But it didn't tell you anything about the quality of what they were actually doing all day.
What should Alan Turing's legacy be?
I've just written a book called Reflections of Alan Turing, which is trying to get away from this sort of nostalgic sepia-tinted view of sort of what he was and what he should stand for. And he was always looking at the future. He was sort of like almost science fiction in, thinking of these sort of amazing things like machine learning, which was sort of obviously completely impossible in the late 1940s.
But whilst many women were employed in code breaking then, the imbalance in numbers between men and women in cybersecurity today is huge.
Well, to help put things right, the National Cybersecurity Centre's Cyber First Girls competition is trying to find the next generation of female code breakers.
It involves solving puzzles to do with coding and logic, cryptography, cybersecurity and networking, and it's really fun.
The competition promotes the idea that girls can code.
Here I am today. It's officially competition day and I'm very excited.
We're going to also give the teams some top tips.
In the semi-finals, we could see the leaderboard, and I remember everyone was rushing to do more challenges.
12 and 13-year-old girls from across the UK have been competing in this year's challenge, which has moved online. You may think that's where it should be anyway, but it is a collaborative and creative process.
We need to succeed at our mission to keep the UK safe, to keep people who live in the UK safe to work and live online. And we need all kinds of people to do that, just to represent the society that we're working for, but also to get all of those different perspectives. And girls sometimes bring a different perspective.
And some would argue that women have a real knack for it.
Women are good at linguistics, which makes them irreplaceable at any natural language processing services. They're also very attentive to detail and good at pattern recognition and overall patience, which are requirements for any computer science-related job.
And with an abundance of all those qualities, this year's contenders are certainly feeling the pressure. Having battled their way through ethical hacking, cryptography, decoding, logic tasks and much more. Whilst waiting to find out who wins this year, I spoke to an ex-finalist who's now studying cybersecurity at university. And because she set on a career in the field afterwards, we had to keep her identity under wraps.
I think definitely because it's computing, there was more pressure to do well because I got to prove myself because I'm a girl. It's just that initial leap and then I was hooked. You see all these women who are very inspirational and you want to live up to them and you don't want to let all the other women down and you want to help inspire the young people yourself.
Back to the competition and the moment of truth is upon us.
The winner is, I'm sure you'll be right online.
I really enjoyed the logic and coding ones, but I also really enjoyed cybersecurity because it required you to think in different ways and use different methods of hacking into some fake websites.
Really makes you think of how easy it actually is to access other people's data and how important it is to keep your data safe.
I had to connect a circuit board, and then once you covered your hand it would start beeping, and we figured out that those beeping were Morse codes, so like dots and dashes, and we wrote those down and found out what those were.
In the cryptography sections, so if you ever needed to send like a coded message to someone, I learned a lot of different types of codes. After doing the competition, like a cybersecurity job is now like an option for me.
Congratulations to the girls of Highgate School. What an inspiring story. Now, one of the few films that I got to see at the cinema last year was Tenet, which as a massive geek, I absolutely loved.
And I know you saw it twice, which I don't think I've ever done.
Yeah, second time with subtitles, which I really recommend because it helps you to understand what on earth is going on. Because this is a film where half the story is going forwards and half the story is going backwards at the same time in the same scene.
So maybe it's no surprise that it won the Oscar for Best Visual Effects.
Yeah, and if you did see it and you wondered how they got cars crashing and buildings exploding in both directions at the same time, well, the answer may surprise you.
Inversion.
Aim it and pull the trigger. You're not shooting the bullet, you're catching it.
Doing visual effects on a Chris Nolan film is, I imagine, is different from the majority of big budget Hollywood films with a lot of visual effects in, because his approach is very much about finding ways to film practical elements. Wherever possible, we wanted to find ways of filming real components and mixing it up a little bit so that they felt very real and grounded in the real world, but still had that sort of slightly odd kind of, it wasn't just a case of filming forwards things and reversing them. There was more to it than that, more interesting and more complicated. A really good example is, where we have cars pulling away quickly and they're an inverted car, you would expect the wheels to spin and throw some dust or gravel out backwards. What we did for those, we found a way of dragging a car backwards while its wheels were spinning forward, so it threw dirt out backwards, but it was going the wrong direction. So then we inverted the whole thing, so the car pulled away, sucking dust into the back of the wheel. So that was a really good example of the sort of approach where we find a practical, real-world event and then just sort of turn it on its head a little bit so that it felt real but wrong.
You want to crash a plane, but not from the air. That was so dramatic. Well, how big a plane? That part is a little dramatic.
The plane crashing into a building. Talking to people since the film came out, everyone assumes that is largely CG, or must be, components of that must be CG. But in reality, that was actually achieved as a practical event where we used a full-size real plane and built a set and towed the plane into the set, and all of the pyro explosions and everything is in the shot for real. There were visual effects involved in that we had to clean up the tow ropes and we added jet blasts to the engines and CG trees to be blown around. But really the vast majority of the chunk of that shot was in camera, and so it's kind of turning it on its head again a little bit, in that people assume that it is CG, but it isn't, or that some major components of it were CG. The end scene in the film obviously contains a lot of big explosion events, and there's a combination of forwards and backwards explosions at the same time, and obviously you can't train an explosion to be backwards, so we had to add one half of that shot. So whenever there's a combination of two things, one of them has been added. So we certainly did that a lot for the sequence where there's a minefield of people and trucks running up and down a hill with mines going off. And we used a combination of practical shot filmed elements, but also CG explosions, which had to incidentally match exactly the practical ones because they were right next to each other. Another major event in the end battle scene where a building is simultaneously blown up by inverted group of people and a normal group of people. So it's simultaneously exploding and imploding. So we built two large, or they were 1/3 scale 10-story buildings, two matching buildings, and we filmed each of them from a matching camera angle, and we blew one up at the top and one at the bottom, and then we could reverse the film and composite the two together, reverse one of the films and composite the two together. So this building had this sort of simultaneous exploding and imploding event.
This reversing the flow of time doesn't us being here now mean it never happened.
Okay, I think Spencer's got a bit carried away. As ever, you can find us in the right order on social media: YouTube, Instagram, Facebook and Twitter at BBC Click. I'll tell you what, I'll leave him to it. Thanks for watching and we'll see you soon.